Welcome one, welcome all. We get a fun Sunday of Nashville ahead of us here after a trucks race on Friday and then an Xfinity race yesterday. And we have a lot of fun on tap today. As always, I am joined by Statsational Stats. How have you been, man?
Doing well. Getting close here on these, like Friday night, Saturday, got real close to taking one down. Have not taken 100K down yet this year in NASCAR, so I feel like today's the day. Could be. This is a little bit less of a track that we should see a lot of chaos and things like that. So it should stay to form, which maybe gives us a little bit of an advantage.
Yes, very much so. Happy Sunday to you too, Jake. How have you been, man? Hopefully everything is well. 4th of July next weekend too, so we get a large weekend. So it should be a lot of fun. Stats, when I look at this slate here, it looks like we got Denny Hamlin on the pole. We got Kyle Larson inside the top 5, and we got plenty of options to choose from. I mean, we got probably a min 1 dom, maybe min 2 doms here today. Just looking at it, it depends on if you consider Truex a dom too. You never know what people might consider a dom and whatnot. But really, this is a good track. We saw some good racing on Friday and Saturday. I know Eckes, led the entire trucks race. Heim never really got into the picture. But in reality, though, over the past couple of days, Nemechek taking the lead yesterday and never really looking too far back. I know Custer had a little bit of a short run car to kind of give him a run for his money in stages 2 and 3. But what do you think this race is going to look like today? Do you think we'll see more of what we saw Saturday? Or maybe a unique look with, I know it's super hot outside right now.
Yeah, but we're also looking for some rain today as well, which may cool down the track. There's always a ton of variables. Kyler was going to be good here, but I think they're going to get some spotty showers. And I don't think we have any real risk of this one not finishing. We did last week. And of course, that did screw me last week. I had a high stakes winner when I thought it was all said and done. And of course, they came back to screw me. But this one we may. So yeah, it's going to be hot. Could change things a little bit on the track, but I do think we get a little rain in here, cools the track down, and that may offset it. But if you look at the betting markets, they're anticipating a pretty clean race. Typically, we don't have a ton of history here, but this is not a place where we see a lot of wrecking. We see cars basically get out to the front and then stay there. It's a real tough track to pass on. So that lends itself to the guys starting up at the front row. We'll get into those specifics. But, historically, we've seen also the guys in the back have a real hard time. Same reasons, getting into the winning lineup. It's hard to find good, especially the guys who are expensive starting in the back have typically not really done well for DFS purposes here. So we may be able to find maybe some value plays, some real cheap guys. But what we've seen from lineups that have won here in the past, it's a lot of guys starting in the top half of the field as opposed to those guys in the bottom. So we're really looking for dom points. It should be at this track. I think the place where we're going to find guys being able to jump and change positions, get themselves a better position on the track, it's going to be in the pits. So I think the pit strategy, that's going to be crucial. I think that's going to be it could get a little chaotic. I believe the pit here is a little bit tricky with the pitting. So that could be the most exciting part of the race could happen on the pits, and that's where we could see this race won or lost. But I fully anticipate whoever gets out there first on the restarts, and certainly to start this race, will lead a whole lot of laps. And we've got one of the favorites starting up on the front. So that's kind of what we're looking for in this race. I don't think a lot of chaos. Don't expect a lot of cautions. Expect this one to stay green quite a long time. Also, the other thing, if you are looking at this from a historical perspective, or not from a historical perspective, but from the aspect of the practice times, the A group was by far superior to the B. So if you're looking at practice times, trying to get a gauge, if someone ran in the B and they finished, and they had they were down at 15th, that was a much better time than maybe is showing on the surface, just because the A was significantly better than the B. Those splits were a major difference. So keep that in mind if you're looking at practice times as far as speed in this race.
Yeah, absolutely. We got a bunch of cars starting far back too, so it's very interesting to kind of hear you say that maybe targeting more of the guys who are starting in the upper half are going to be a little bit better. So it's going to be a unique scenario. I would say. I think the pricing this week stats is super soft. They downgraded, the top price on Hamlin and Larson. Both are in the mid 10Ks. You got Martin Truex there, at what 9,800 there, starting 17th. Then you just go down, further down the list and stuff. You got guys like Bubba Wallace at 7,800. You got AJ Allmendinger 6,500. Not that he probably belongs there, but the guy who got the biggest price decrease for no reason was Justin Haley. Going down to 5,600. So I think you're going to see a lot of teams with like 2-3 studs. I think 2 is probably the minimum because DraftKings is just allowing you to do that. Like it didn't seem like that was the case kind of earlier on in the season, but over the last few weeks, what they're just allowing now is just, hey, jam in 3, even 4 studs. Even you can probably play 4 guys above 9K today and get away with it. I mean, does it feel soft to you?
Yeah, I agree. There is a bit of softness. I like I said, with these guys starting up front, I mean, Hamlin, I think is really just at 10-3 is underpriced, should probably be in the 11K, and Larson right there with him, especially when you look at how good he's been, this season, and certainly at these type of tracks that we're looking at as far as tracks that correlate. I don't think we even mentioned it. This is an intermediate track, 1.3 miles. We got 300 laps today. And again, we're looking for DOMs, probably 1 or 2 DOMs in this race. So I would set it for 1 or 2 on your on Saber, kind of, and we'll post. I haven't looked at it. I don't know if we have that up yet. Did we post the DOMs over on the on RPS?
Yes, the sheet with DOMs here. I left off Truex because I don't think he belongs in a DOM group. You kind of mentioned it too. Just trying to get up there to the top of the row, to the top row will be very difficult, but there's a chance he could lead late. But I don't want to group him in with a DOM, like with DOM settings at all, right? So I basically did a lot of the top 10, got Byron in there. I kind of left off Chase Elliott starting 13th. I mean, I'm really not going outside the top 10 for this DOM group. But with Hamlin and with Larson both up there, both being, very, 4-1 favorites and stuff, but you can expect them, Bell's up there too. Like I'm looking at a min 2 DOMs, but I wouldn't want more than that. I just think like I want 2 guys starting in the top 10 at least. Do I really want to do more than that? If I'm not having, I think I'm going to do a min 2 max 3. That's going to be the rule that I do stats. Is that a little too aggressive, or maybe I should just cap it at 2, or maybe should I even branch up the DOMs into the top 15? What do you think about the DOMs?
I think you have to be careful. I would go down to 1. I'm playing mostly 1 and 2 because you could easily, you could get something like we saw with the trucks and someone go wire to wire. I mean, Hamlin could get out there and really just eat up all the DOM points. So I think there's that risk there. So I think 3 is a lot. I think 3 is more unlikely than 1 being able to dominate and gobble up all of those points. So I'm leaning more towards lineups with 1 or 2 build. I think what you said is important there. People ask this; it's probably the most common question every week: how many DOMs are you putting in your lineup? And you said it good with Truex. Where can Truex lead laps? Absolutely, he could lead laps here, but we may not necessarily need him to. He may still be strong here with just on place differential alone. So if we could get, so I would leave those type of guys out where, they could potentially lead laps and accumulate DOM points, but I don't necessarily want to use up a DOM spot in my lineup for that person who can also just be a place differential play. So can we see a Hamlin Truex in the nuts? Of course, with Truex not really leading many laps at all, definitely. So I would be cautious there. So I like what you're saying. It's not just guys who could lead laps. I think you want your DOMs when you're restricting them is guys who really need to lead laps in order to be in the winning lineup.
All right, perfect. So I'll defer to you on that, where we'll do a min 1 DOM, max 2 of the guys in the top 10. And here's the thing, like you said, if Hamlin goes out and leads every lap, right? You got Truex starting 17th, you can put up a good enough score. You got Blaney starting 18th. You got Chastain starting 20th. Logano starting 26th. You got PD options. right there that can easily put up a decent enough score to where, hey, if it was Hamlin going wire to wire like we saw Friday night, absolutely can pay dividends. So I'm going to pull up SaberSim here, and SaberSim has been just awesome, absolutely crushing it in all sports, but more specifically, the MLB team over the last few weeks has just been on a massive heater in stats. You have been a part of that heater there. It's just been incredible to watch. What we have seen, it helps with Saber, helps with just having great takes. I know that you guys have great takes there. Boynton has been absolutely smashing it with the O's and stuff, his Baltimore Orioles, and then what you have been able to do on FanDuel and DraftKings. Really, SaberSim is great to have. And RPS 15% off. You can get the SaberSim Ultimate Package that includes contest sims, or you can just get their basic setting too with a subscription to Run Pure Sports. Again, code RPS15, 15% off your first payment here. Gets you access to everything that you might need for all sports too. They even have WNBA, and they post projections an hour before lock. I know that's not going to be a smashing hit, but if it makes you money, it makes you money. Stats, like you said, just go ahead and give your take on Saber over the last few weeks, how great it's been for you.
Yeah, it's definitely changed my DFS building for the positive. So I'm a big fan of Saber. I mean, just without getting into every single aspect, I don't even think I've really even the capabilities. I feel like I'm hanging. Am I hanging for you? Because I keep going in and out.
It's in and out, but it's bearable right now. If it's not bearable, I will message you. But yeah,
well, what I'll do is I'm gonna just reboot it real quick. That usually fixes it. But and then I'll be back. But yes, definitely listen, Saber. Since I've switched to Saber maybe a couple of months ago, it's been a huge positive in our ROI. So definitely a proponent.
All right, I'll see you in a second here, Stats.
Yeah, I'll be right back.
We're going to go ahead and break down the 9K and up range here. So we're going to be starting with Larson, starting fourth. You got Hamlin starting first. Christopher Bell starting third, right? That's the 10K and up range. With Hamlin, you're sitting at plus 400 on DraftKings. I think it was even plus 350 on DraftKings, I think, earlier in the day. You also have Larson at plus 400, Bell at plus 800, and Truex was plus 650. So you have this, large group here. I wouldn't say it's large, but it's very easy to get 2, even 3 in a single entry build. When I go ahead and look at this slate here, I see a decent amount of opportunity to just grab the Dom points with Hamlin. And Hamlin starting on the pole is going to be a very, very tough person to pass on here, a tough driver to fade. We know what he can do in the long run. We know what he's able to do, not only at Nashville and stuff too, but everything that he can kind of include in there. I think Hamlin is probably the best play. If you're fading him, you're banking on maybe losing that lead early, maybe not getting into the mix, maybe losing that lead out to a guy like Josh Berry, who we will talk about a little later on. Larson has just been fine. I mean, if I'm able to get Larson starting fourth, we know the speed of that car. We know what it can do. I like what Larson provides. We know every single track he goes to, he's going to have a chance to win. I have a really easy path to fitting him, and especially in single entry. I don't really want to pass it up. But if I do want to pass up on it, it's for JGR. It's for those Toyotas. It's for Christopher Bell. It's for Martin Truex. Truex can get it done without dominating at all. Starting 17th. He's been just incredible at Nashville. We know what he can do from top to bottom. Love him. Love Bell. Really, I think Larson just becomes one of those guys where if I'm doing 20 lineups, I probably would only have 30, 40%. But in single entry, he might get the nod over Christopher Bell for me just because of what he has just done this season. Chase Elliott, I'm not going to be extremely high on starting 13th. I'm not really going to be buying on Hendrick as a whole, but I could be, talked into Byron, as we heard Stats mention a little bit earlier on. Having a good pit crew is very important, being able to pass in the pits, being able to kind of have the strategies maybe where you're doing an undertake, right? Like you come in a couple laps earlier, all of a sudden that saves you 2-3 seconds. You're 2-3 seconds faster in the pits, and all of a sudden you flip the position in a gigantic way. No one's better at doing that than William Byron and Hendrick. I mean, I just feel like those guys are not only an incredible crew, but also very good with their strategy. Ryan Blaney starting 18th, Ross Chastain starting 20th. 2 guys who are going to be great for, place differential. So definitely don't want to discount them. Absolutely going to see them hit plenty of lineups. I think if you're doing I only want 2 of those guys at the top instead of 3. well, you're going to be seeing a lot of Blaney, a lot of Chastain, even a lot of Logano, who is a little bit further down there too. So don't be afraid to go to those guys. They are great. Kenny G, after the Sims, do you use ROI or RAROI? I always use RAROI. Gives you a little bit of a more dispersed ownership. But if you want to do ROI, trying to hit that sweet spot, what that does is it basically narrows your sweet spot down to here instead of right here. But if you are right, you're going to see dividends. But obviously, I don't like to pretend that I'm 100% hitting on all my takes. Usually, it's about 30%. Stats, I broke down the 9K and up range. I talked about Hamlin being my favorite play. If you don't want Larson, well, you have two great alternatives in JGR and Truex being a great PD driver as it is anyway. What's your take, 9K and up?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned JGR. They are by far the favorites to win this race. So we got to keep that in mind. We've got, obviously, Larson seems to, I think, between him and Hamlin, they're always the highest priced guys, always the top two favorites each and every week. Doesn't matter what the track is. I mean, Larson, he won here in the last gen car back in 21. He's got a 4th place and a 5th place here in the next gen. When you look at the comps that I'm looking at, as far as tracks, Kansas and Vegas, he won both of those races this year. Obviously has pretty strong performances in all of them. I mean, what more can you say? I would expect, to me, I think it's the top 2 guys here have the highest likelihood of getting all those Dom points. I can easily see them splitting it. And then that second guy being Denny Hamlin. He's starting on the front row, starting first. It's going to be real tough to take that starting spot against him. I believe Berry is going to be next to him, who's been unbelievable so far early in this season. But I think the way it's shaping up, it's going to be kind of I love to look for a reason to maybe fade a guy who's going to be high owned. I'm having a hard time with either one of these guys looking to fade these guys. I think Hamlin easily gets out front, leads a lot of laps, and gets those early Dom points, and I think he winds up with a strong finish as well. So I think the race is probably between the two of these guys. They are the 2 favorites. But the next guy in this group who is getting a lot of ownership, I like as well, and that's Martin Truex. I'm not sure, I kind of missed where you were at on him. I assume you probably like Truex as a place differential guy.
Yeah, he's core play for me, just because I mentioned it before, how much salary we get, and it's basically just plug and play with Martin Truex.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So, I mean, I hate that I'm just looking at a very chalky type of builds here this week, but I think Truex is a strong play. Starting 17th, you look, he is the 3rd option in the betting markets to win this race. Starting 17th, I think it's a no-brainer at that price of the of 9,800. You've got Chase Elliott starts 13th. He's got a win here in the next gen car back in 22 and a 4th place finish. He's been really strong. Those finishes happened when he had a much higher start position than he did here. So we got to keep that in mind again at this track. I think of these guys up here, I think he's going to be fairly low owned. I think he's low owned for a reason. And Elliott's not going to be one of those guys. He's not going to be my guy under 20% that I'm looking at later on today when we give that play of the day of a low owned guy. So Elliott won't be that guy for me. Then you've got starting in the 7th spot, Byron, and I think this is kind of where he's going to be all race. I think he'll finish. He'll have a solid finish somewhere between 5th and 10th. But I just don't think it's going to be enough for us really to have him in the winning lineups. I don't think he really dominates any laps here. Gets a solid finish, but nothing spectacular. We won't need him. So I think he's another guy that I'm not going to be high on. I don't think the market's going to be terribly high as well. Blaney starting 18th. I think this has kind of been a good spot. We look at that Truex starting position, that starting in the 20s for the solid drivers. That's been a good spot here historically. We don't have a ton of history, of course, but I think Blaney makes a really solid option, especially in cash lineups. I think his downside is pretty limited. He was the second fastest in practice. That was, I believe he was in the A group. Blaney, yeah, he was in the A group. So you got to kind of adjust for that, but really strong in all from 3 laps all the way up to 20, kind of maintain that speed. He was third or second, depending on which one of those you're looking at. So I think Blaney at that 17th or the 18th starting position is going to be really solid play. More so cash than GPP, but I think fine play in GPP as well. He's going to have a decent amount of ownership, and then the guy starting or the guy who is priced right below him, Chastain at the 9K. I think similar here. We look, he's the defending champion at this track. Won here. He's got really solid finishes. We've raced 3 times, twice in the next gen car. He's got a 5th and a 1st, 2nd when we were in the last gen. He's got a 4th place in Vegas. So decent comps here. He's got a 4th and a 5th in Vegas if you go back to last season, and some decent finishes at Kansas. So I think Chastain's going to be again in a similar spot here to Blaney, in the fact that we're getting that upside, that place differential upside. So I think he's really, I think at 9K that's a good price on DraftKings. So we've got some options. I think we're looking at these 9K plus guys. I think there's going to be a lot of these guys that you're going to want to have in your lineups.
Yeah, exactly. This is where, if you didn't want, more than 2 guys, at the top, right? Like, well, if I only want Truex and Hamlin, well, going down to 9K is absolutely a great consolation at that point, or a great strategy even. We can get you out of that mud in the 5K range and into the 6K range that we'll talk about a little bit later. Again, code RPS15, 15% off your first payment. All the tags for Big T are up, and he does have a core play in the 7 and 6K range too. So should be a lot of fun. Let's go ahead and dive down into this 8K range. We got a lot of drivers here. Stats. We got Tyler Reddick, Joey Logano starting 26th, Brad Keselowski, Ty Gibbs not able to get the job done in Xfinity, Chris Buescher starting 9th, and fan favorite Kyle Busch starting 27th, and as well as Alex Bowman to cap things off. So of course, J-Ruff, please don't say KV too. I'll tell you this. After they went to the wet tires, I'm like, maybe I'll have a chance to cash whatever it was. And then I saw Kyle Busch slamming into the wall. And thank goodness for Briscoe getting 2nd place, because I don't know how I'm in cash. But after I saw Kyle Busch slamming into the wall, I've never been more tilted. I'm like, how do you do that on caution laps? Just straight up hit the barrier. That was one of the most frustrating things the last week's stats. And then Bubba Wallace obviously being taken out about 30, 40 laps later. How much fun that was. We also have a great comment here from Izzy B. Ross, best average finish than Larson. That's actually very interesting. Jake talking about, Josh Berry, that we'll get to a little bit later. It looks like Izzy B's on him as well. And then, of course, the Prez, Wiley, here as well in the chat. Stats, when I look at this range, Logano is the number 1. He's the alpha in this range that I'd really be interested in. And then, as much as it pains me to say it, Kyle Busch would be their 2nd, purely for place differential, but also the fact that he's only 8,200. He's just getting cheap, where you just have to have interest in it. He has a top 15 potential every time he takes the wheel of the car, which is probably good enough. As far as upside goes, maybe Keselowski being the best at managing position, managing tires, potentially being able to hold inside the top 5. Ty Gibbs, there just comes a point in time, stats, where I'm just going to be cut off from Ty Gibbs until he proves it. I think I should put him in the same boat that I put Bowman and Chase Elliott in earlier in the year. I'm not playing him until he proves me wrong. And if you've been living by that motto, you've probably been printing over the last month, because every time he's going to project well, just because his odds every time he takes the car are just crazy. And they're crazy good, because I think, Vegas doesn't want you betting on him, because they're always 18-1, or they're always inside the top 10 in terms of just, finishing odds. So it always makes it a little bit difficult. But clearly Logano, then Busch, and then Keselowski probably for me. Reddick closely behind. What about you here, stats?
Yeah, I think these guys are all close. Look, Reddick doesn't have the best track history here, but he ran really well last year and lost a tire. So he was running in the top all day. So you got to kind of take that with a grain of salt. Starting 6, I think he does have some Dominator potential. Logano's the guy who is going to jump out to most people because he's starting at 26th. But I don't know, I'm not all that confident when I look at his history and what he's been doing on intermediate tracks as of late. It's not all that impressive. So And I think starting where he's starting, I think he's going to have a hard time getting up and getting us a strong enough finish. I don't think he has any chance to lead any laps. He really hasn't done that much at all this year anyway. And considering where you're starting, I think we've got guys in this range that could potentially lead some laps for us with, I think, stronger potential finishing spots than Logano. So I don't know if he's going to be chalky, but that's a guy that I think is fadeable. I think people are just going to look at that starting position and maybe fall in love with Logano here. So I would get under the market on him in my 150s and be a fade maybe in my 20 max builds and lower. Keselowski, I think, look, he's probably got some of the fastest, one of the fastest cars, at least on the long runs. I think he has potential here starting 5th to be able to lead some laps. So I do think at that price at 8,500, we've got potential Dom points. Going to be fairly low owned. I like him actually better than Logano because I think his chances of leading some laps in this race are greater and getting us the Dom points that we need. I think they're going to be fairly close, maybe, I don't know, 17 to 25%. I'm not sure where Sabres got him now, but I would lean more towards Logano, towards Keselowski here, just because I think his potential of Dom points, and I think he'll probably be lower owned just because of that starting position. The guy you're talking about, Ty Gibbs, yeah, I mean, look, it's JGR. They're the favorites. He had the fastest car in practice. He had the fastest car in Xfinity, right? And then bad things happened. They had problems on the pit. He got spun out and didn't find his way into a winner. But yeah, I'm never of the school of like you have to show it to me first. I want to get in there before. So it's like trying to pick a bottom on a stock, right? If you wait for the stock to bounce and then hit new highs, like oftentimes it's too late. But catching a falling knife, as they say, it can be dangerous. Yeah, I mean, it's tough. He seems to always be starting right in this like high single digits. He's got potentially really good car, and but man, I just can't ignore the betting markets. And typically, you would think, listen, the guys betting NASCAR, they're doing it every single week. They're going to have that same feeling that we do towards a Gibbs, right? Like he's been disappointing me so much. I see it. I mean, part of betting is kind of reading the markets, and the fact that he's still hanging in there, he's like what, third, sixth, he's the 7th choice, 8th choice in the market right now. Yeah, I just can't totally get off him here. I'll be on. I'm not going to go heavy, but with the fastest car in practice, even when you adjust for the groups, and he was in the better group, he was still the best car out there. Yeah, I'm gonna jump back on the horse and at least be even with the field, which I think is going to be in the mid-20s or something like that. Maybe the DFS world is going to be a little bit more down. We could see probably from the chat. What's up?
Yeah, I think it'll be lower. They have 16
Yeah.
on Sabre, which I think it might be below 20.
Yeah, it might be below. Now, like these guys help. Like in the chat, they help. Like if everyone just starts saying, screw you, like there's no chance of playing Gibbs, then I'll feel better about it because I'll get him at a lower ownership. But yeah, I mean, Gibbs, he's been interesting every week. It's just there's always that guy. And, he's a young driver. He's obviously got a ton of talent. It's going to happen, but I'm hoping to be there the day that it happens. There's an old saying, I guess it's not really apropos yet. He's got to win, but like if you didn't show up to the wedding, you don't go to the funeral. Right. So that's like that's an old horse race. If Wiley's in here, he might have heard that with the horses. Like, so in other words, if you didn't bet on him when he broke out, then stay away from him after that. But so I'm going to try to get in for the wedding and see if I can get Gibbs at a fairly low ownership. I think Buescher is probably a fade play. Starting 9th, don't see a whole lot of upside. He's not great at these type of tracks. And then, man, Kyle Busch, I don't even how deep do we want to get into Kyle Busch? I mean, that was just like if he couldn't do it for us last week, starting where he was starting. I mean, this is just bad. Again, you're getting a good place differential position again, 27th, but I just can't. I can't have faith in him. I'm not going to totally punt it in and fade him in my 150 builds, but yeah, I could certainly see not wanting any piece of him in 20 maxes and 3 max things like that. But yeah, and he's a guy with he's got a temper. He's not exactly a guy who stays level headed.
Yeah.
When things aren't going right for him, it seems to be spiraling, and part of it could be his issue as well, where he just does not have a lot of patience. He's used to being one of the best drivers in the entire sport, being up front, challenging. Getting knocked out of these races early has got to be driving him absolutely bananas, and it's probably going to add to him making even more mistakes, kind of pushing the issue a little bit. And so yeah, I think Kyle Busch is, again, I'll have pieces of him, but not going to be real comfortable. I think Bowman's another guy. Like, has Bowman been anywhere near the nuts in any lineup this season? I don't think so.
Oh, that's a good point. I mean, when I think of Bowman, I just think of like an automatic, like just check off the box, right? Like, I don't really want him, especially if he's starting top 15. I want to say there was a race where he put up a very, very good score because he was starting far in the back. But anytime he's starting inside the top 15, here's his finishes. Started 5th last week, 36th. Started 8th at Save Mart 350, finished 15th. Started 6th at the Coca-Cola 600, finishes 9th. Like, you're not getting top 5 upside from him, as maybe we saw earlier on in the year when he actually put up a couple great scores. What we have seen over the last 3 months has just been mediocre. And that's basically been the mantra for Alex Bowman, has been just mediocre. I just don't have any interest in him and Buescher. I think you hit the hammer on the nail with Buescher. It's just like, it's okay to check off a guy here, and I'm okay with doing that with Buescher and Bowman for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I agree there. Yeah, Bowman, no chance. Yeah, I mean, high single digits upside as far as finish position. I think that's about it.
All right, 7K range now. We got Josh Berry starting 2nd, who's probably very interesting. I think someone mentioned it earlier that it's his home track. Put up a very, very good time in qualifying. Obviously gets the 2nd spot. Bubba Wallace here starting 24th. Another guy who crashed last week to just further deepen that dagger into my heart after I was already having Kyle Busch just slamming into the wall under caution. We have Daniel Suarez starting 31st. Chase Briscoe with a great drive in the wet, last week, after a 2nd place finish starting 19th. Gragson, Corey Heim starting 29th, and then Cindric starting 10th. For me, when I rank these 3 guys, it's Wallace number 1, and then I would put Heim number 2, and then I'd actually go with Berry. And the reason for Berry is the reason that you said that, what was it, 3 weeks ago, was Cindric over Blaney, right? What in what world does Berry get the lead and, able to hold off Hamlin for 50, 60 laps, something like that, right? Like, it's not likely, but it's not impossible. And what you're getting with the guy starting 2nd, a guy who probably won't be owned. I mean, people have been real hesitant to, play some of these, bad. I wouldn't say it's a bad car. Not elite cars at the very top, I should say. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if he's under 20%. And there's a world where he leads some laps. There's absolutely a world. Maybe it's on strategy too, where Hamlin comes into the pits, maybe 10 laps early, late on in the race. Berry somehow holds 2nd. All of a sudden, you get 30 laps led or whatever. Like, there's paths to Berry being optimal here. He's 13-1 odds, which basically kind of puts him into that Keselowski Gibbs range, right? Where 13-1 is very respectable. 7,700 is a tall tag, but I'm very curious to hear what you have to say here, Stats. Like, is he a guy that you would go out of your way? Would you pair him with Hamlin maybe in single entry and stuff, or no?
I'm okay. Yeah, I'm okay having them as a pair. I mean, it'll definitely be unique. I don't think a lot of people are going to have him. I'm going to be higher on Berry, I think, than most people, because, I mean, he's been super impressive. They are, they've been running up at the top. We know how good he's been on the short tracks, but I would not be shocked. Again, if it's hard to pass, all he's got to do is beat Hamlin. I mean, it sounds easier said than done, but all he's got to do is beat Denny Hamlin on the start. But if that does happen, he's not going to be easy to get around, and just the points that he can accumulate early here could be enough with a strong finish to get us where we need to be. And there is the possibility. Look, if we're going to play a Larson with Hamlin, why can't we play Berry and Hamlin? I think it makes even more sense. So I'm fine playing Berry in these lineups. I think he's going to be super low owned, and because of the fact that, obviously that 2nd starting position, and the fact that he's got to beat Hamlin really to get a lot of those points. But who knows? I mean, what if something happens in the pits where he could beat him off the pit, get a bunch of, get 50, 60 laps led? I don't think it's out of the question. So I think he's going to be under owned for for the potential that he has, and I think he can get a strong finish. Like you said, the betting markets have him. He's not that far away from. He's basically the same odds as Chase Elliott. He's not that far off from a Ty Gibbs. I don't know. I'm the ownership on him. I just feel will be low, but I think people are starting to realize just maybe how good this team is and how good a driver Berry has been. So even with that, though, I think we can get over the market and maybe catch a guy who's low owned, getting us into the nuts. But yeah, I'm not afraid to play him with any of these other high price guys that are starting up at the front. Suarez is the guy who potentially may be the highest owned here because of his starting position. I mentioned before, we don't typically get a lot of guys starting in the 30s that make their way up to the into the winning lineups. For cash plays, I think Suarez is probably a pretty solid play. I think GPPs, you could. I'm fine if you're going to get under the market on him. I think you probably want to have some pieces in your 20 max because of that starting position. I think he does have the ability to maybe finish. Is he a top 10 car? Probably not. Can he get you that 10th to 15th finish? I think that's definitely possible and potentially get you enough points here to get into a winning lineup. I mean, his recent intermediate track results here have not been all that great. He has not gotten out of the 20s in his last 4. You got to go back to Texas, to where he had a 5th place finish. So he hasn't been great. I'm not all that high. I think a lot of these guys starting way back are going to be a little higher owned. That is true. Yeah, at this track, he has a 12th to 15th and a 7th. So at the track, he's been good. But I'm going to be cautious on Suarez. I think for me, going over the market of, getting close to 30%, I think is going to be too much. I'd rather be closer to the 20% and maybe just a little below that on Suarez. I think the other guy who's interesting in this range is Corey Heim. So this is a guy jumping from the trucks up to the Cups. I think he's had a couple of races at this level. But new driver, again, starting 29th. I'm just cautious in this group. If you ask me, do I like Berry or Heim? I mean, I'm going to take my shot with Berry getting the Dom points than Heim having a strong finish here. I think it's always going to be tough for a new driver. This is the best. I mean, he's the best driver in the truck series, but I think this is going to be a kind of a tall ask. Now he's racing. He's in the 23. He's in 2311 equipment. Is this like their?
Yeah. Is it the what car number is it again? Is it the 45? No, that's Red Egg. I'm getting it up now. What car number it is? Hold on. It is the 50.
50 car. Okay. So, and so I mean, I think he's going to have decent equipment here, but
it's the 2311.
It is 2311, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're under the TMT name. But I mean, he filled in basically his other 2 races this year were those starts for Eric Jones, who was injured. Yeah, I'd be cautious. I'd be cautious with Heim. I think in this group, I like Berry, who's not going to be as owned. Berry, I think did I pass on Bubba Wallace? I didn't mention. I don't know if you mentioned Bubba Wallace.
Yeah, I did. I like Bubba a lot. I mean, last week
Bubba should be good here.
Yeah, he's very good. And it goes with the Toyotas that we're talking about here, too. I mean, if we like 2311, well, I mean, Reddick's fine, starting 6. We know how well he ran last year before the tire, came off. But Bubba Wallace, starting 24th, you're going to get good PED. Heim, you can take a chance on, too. And I like what BG3 said when he drove the 43 for, Eric Jones when he had the back injury and stuff. He did well. And this should be better equipment, right? Like, it's fine, but I don't want to go out of my way for these type of guys' stats, right? Like when I see this, sometimes they just kind of get into this like 30-point range, which can be good enough. But really, I need someone to take this race by the balls and almost just drive this thing into the top 20. And it's fine. I mean, you can take that gamble with Heim. You can take that gamble with Suarez. Suarez has been great here, but like you said, at other intermediate tracks, he really hasn't. So it's like, what pill do you want to take? Like if you're high on Chastain, I think you can be high on Suarez. Like I wouldn't even mind pairing up Chastain and Suarez in a few lineups if you're, just doing 20 max, or if you're just doing 3 entry max and you put Suarez and Chastain there. Well, you're giving yourself a decent place differential floor. We know how effective they were last year and how they have been over the previous years here at Nashville. I mean, that team, Trackhouse Racing, has done a great job here. And I don't mind, kind of taking that approach, but I like what you said about Barry. I don't think it's a 150 play pure chaos just because, of course, everyone's a play at 150, right? I would play if I'm making 10 lineups, hand building and stuff. I'll throw in Barry in one. Like, you just kind of have to have that mindset of like, look, 70% of the time it's probably not going to work out, but 30% of the time is better than what he's owned. And I'll take that chance all day, not just because it's 150 or not. Like, if I'm doing 20 entry max, I'd probably throw him in 2 or 3 lineups too. So we got Izzy talking about, yes, we got people sleeping on Chevy. We got Trackhouse stock is fire. I like it. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about this 6K range now here, stats. I know we got baseball law coming up, so we don't want to creep too much into that time, but let's go ahead and talk about 6K range. Allmendinger has been great here in Nashville. You got Eric Jones starting 34th. You got Todd Gilliland starting 32nd. I look at those three, and I get excited. I'm not going to be playing. I don't think either of us are interested in Drake, but he's a fade for me. I'm not going to be too interested in McDowell, even though McDowell, great run last week. Maybe that opens your eyes. I don't know if you'll have an interest in him. But Stenhouse, not really going to have a ton of interest in. Hosfar starting a little bit too high up. Priest, not really on my radar. Really, it's Jones, Gilliland, Dinger for me, and I think I'd almost rank them in that order. What about you, Stats?
Who are you going, Jones, Gilliland, and Dinger?
Yes, Jones, Gilliland, Dinger for me is the top 3 in this range.
Yeah, I think they're all pretty close. I would agree with you. So I think we could totally. I think Priest is a fade here in the 6K range. Hosever, Stenhouse, I think as well. McDowell, maybe you could sprinkle him in a little bit just because he's looked, he's kind of looked better than I've really anticipated him looking. But I've got no problem not playing any McDowell at all. So I do agree. We kind of narrow it down to Gilliland, Jones, and Allmendinger. I think they're really close. When you look, Allmendinger's historically just been a guy who comes in, he's a road course guy, right? But, Colleague's been really fast here. So I think you have to take that into account. They looked really good in Xfinity, right? But looking at the history here for Allmendinger, I mean, not terrible in his 2 trips in this next gen car. He had a 10th place finish last year. I think Eric Jones, we've been waiting, he's got strong finishes here, Jones, 8th and 11th, and we'll take that with a 34th starting position if he can get up to the front. I think it's just been a matter of he's just kind of been getting back from that injury. I think when you look at the intermediate tracks this year, it has not looked good at all, but we're looking at track history. I think it's a similar situation to Suarez, but at a much better price, where track history has been pretty good, even better than Suarez. Intermediate track currently this season, not all that great. But when we go back, last year, the Kansas, which is a really good comp here, had a 3rd place finish. So I'm with you on Jones, kind of like Jones at this track. And then I think Gilliland starting 32nd, another guy starting in the back, just hasn't had great history here, has been decent recently at the intermediate tracks, but 14th finish at one track that we really want to look at, which is Kansas. I think this is, he's a GPP play, and that's about it. I kind of like Jones the most in this group, and then kind of Gilliland, and I like Dinger and then Gilliland for me. So that's kind of how I would put them.
Yeah, I don't think we need to spend too much time in this range. I think kind of on the same page there, and it's kind of a range that I don't get excited by stats. Like, I think it's worth getting the Jones or Gilliland or Dinger over like some of the 5K options, but one of those 5K options is not Justin Haley. Justin Haley is way too cheap. Why do they lower his price? I thought they finally were getting him right. I'm like, oh, they're finally raising Justin Haley's price. They had him at 6,300 last week, and then all of a sudden they just jam him in at 5,600. Of course, he starts 33rd. This is.
Do you know he's got a penalty to start this race?
Yes, but it's not. Here's my thing too, because I think I overreacted to the penalty. What was it? 2 weeks ago at the Xfinity race with Parker Retzlaff. Ended up getting back in the lead lap. I am completely okay just taking that penalty on the chin, right? Like what we're going to see with with all these drivers here, with all the cautions that we have. Even if he gets slapped, I think there's still a fine chance that he gets back in the lead lap eventually. And I think that there's, crew chief, that what they have been able to do has been very smart this year because they've made all the right calls, it seems. And to me, if you're only going to lose a lap, no chance at losing two, I wouldn't think. I'm okay with doing that stats. And really, I hope it kind of deflates the ownership on him because out of all these other guys, I don't really have any interest. Nemechek winning the race, maybe gets him some ownership, the Xfinity race yesterday, starting 35th. I think a lot of people are going to just kind of go to him. But really, he's another guy where he just hasn't done anything this year in the Cup Series. He hasn't done a single thing to deserve respect, and Haley has. And but if I were, had a bunch of salary and already had Haley and I had $6K left, Nemechek's the second choice. Then maybe I have a debate. I think I'd even go all the way down to Hemrick starting 37th. Get some attrition. Also, Colleague hasn't been hasn't been bad, obviously, with Justin Haley and stuff. I would be okay with, doing that. But yeah, I mean, or not Colleague. Colleague for Hemrick there. And obviously Rick Ware racing for Justin Haley. I'm okay just kind of playing Haley from this range. Nemechek is the second guy, and then maybe Hemrick to make things completely fit if I needed a salary. What about you?
Yeah, I'm kind of with you there. Probably just a little. I'm gonna be a little bit more cautious.
Yeah.
On Haley than maybe you are. So I'll probably have a little bit less of him. I agree with you on the on Nemechek. Maybe getting a little bit higher owned just because of that race yesterday has not really done anything. I think it's going to take a race of for almost all of these other guys. I think it's going to take a race of a lot of chaos and a lot of wrecks, which I don't foresee happening in order for these guys to get up there. I'm a little bit more worried with Haley getting lapped here early. I think this race goes green quite a bit. If it stays green, that's where it's going to be a lot tougher for him. I think you're right. If we get some cautions early, he'll get himself back on that lead lap. But I think there is a possibility he gets himself stuck back there, and it becomes really hard to pass. We know it's already a difficult track to pass on, and that penalty normally, it doesn't, especially starting 33rd, it doesn't really scare me all that much. I'm a little bit more cautious about that this week, though. When we look at the other guys in this range, there's really nothing that gets you excited. I mean, Austin Dillon starting 11th is just an absolutely no play. For me, I think these other guys, look, the Joy starts too high. I think Burton starts too high. We could maybe look at the guys starting 30th or worse, which, Herb, Smith, Hemrick, and Fincham. But there's nothing in there that leads me to believe any of these guys are going to be able to finish on the lead lap or anywhere significant enough for us to have them in a winning lineup. So I'm not real fond of this sub 5K group. I think we've got some options, I think, in that 7K, and we've got some guys we could play at 6 that I'm going to be very limited on when I'm playing sub 6K this week.
Yeah, I like it. I think, only having those three guys for me really, and Hemrick just being the pure punt to make things work. If I really wanted an additional stud, would be that kind of last gasp, I'll just throw him in there, right? Which I think it's certainly possible. What if we did have 7 guys, wreck out, and all of a sudden Hemrick's sitting there at 29th, 28th, and you had 3 Doms kind of go off, or not 3 Doms, 3 studs go off, and Truex being in the winner too could open up that door. Let's go ahead and get into our drivers of the day. We'll do SaberSim ownership. Last week, Bubba Wallace came in right around 20%, so I did not cheat the system. But yes, a lot of fun here. Let's go ahead and get the ownership ready. They have Hamlin at a massive ownership and Jones. These seem a little bit high, but we have plenty of drivers to pick from here, stats. We got Josh Berry being the highest owned of the bunch here, under 20%. So what do you think? Who's your driver of the day? Your non-chalk driver of the day?
Well, I'm glad he just came in under. I'm going to go with Berry, and I'll take a shot, man. He's just been really good recently. Gives us a chance at some early Dom points. Any slip up from Hamlin, Berry sneaks in there, and we've got some real cheap, potentially significant Dom points. So I'll take a shot with Berry.
I like it. You're going cheap, 7,700. I'll go even cheaper. I'll go all the way down to the guy that we just mentioned and had a big conversation about, Justin Haley. The drive-through penalty does not scare me at all. I don't want to pass up on getting Justin Haley, where if he did end up on the lead lap, there's a legit chance that he gets a top 15 out of it. What he has been able to do in that car has been incredible. I mean, he does it every week too. I have full faith in, even if there isn't a caution early, to his crew chief finding a way to get that lap back. I'm not worried about the speed at all in that car. And maybe he comes out in the clean air stats. Maybe after that drive-through, he comes out in clean air, able to kind of hold his position and perhaps, get a lucky caution, maybe a lucky break. I don't think he's going to come in at 7%. I think he'll come in right around 15 to 20. But yes, he is my driver of the day. We got stats with Josh Berry as his driver of the day. Thank you all for joining us, and good luck today. Again, code RPS15, 15% off your first payment here at Run for Your Sports. Have a great rest of y'all's day, and bye-bye.